Welcome to Commerce Media Matters, your go-to podcast for unpacking the world of commerce media. Here, we catch up with industry leaders on news, research, insights, perspectives, and everything in between.
Hi everyone, I'm Paul Blackburn, Chief Growth Officer at Voodoo.
And I'm Nick Morgan, founder and CEO of Voodoo.
Emma and Babs, welcome back. It honestly doesn't feel like much time has passed at all since you're in the Voodoo podcast van at Cannes, live, out of the heat. It looks like it's hot over there in London again.
I was going to say, the last time we were cruising down the Croisette, and today we've traded spaces and are pretty far from the French Riviera.
And last time the conversation was all about what's going to come next after Cannes. Fast forward a month and we're actually had the chance to look at where the industry is going, what it's done since then. What are those ideas?
Which makes this a nice place to pick things up. One thing that's stayed with me from our conversation in Cannes with both of you is we've talked about commerce media arriving, right? We feel like it's arrived, it's genuinely here. It's not just an emerging category anymore. It's like it's happening on so many different levels and it's everywhere around us. It's becoming much bigger than, part of the industry. Fast forward a month, we wish the glow of Cannes was still around and the rosé was still flowing, and I know all that. But we're seeing lots of announcements. We're seeing lots happening where, the US, everyone's back at the beat retreat and everyone's back here doing their summer. There's still lots happening. And it got me wondering, is there a big structural shift happening? Can you sense that as well? Like we're getting it full barrel. What are you guys sensing from the industry? Is it happening faster off the back of Cannes? What are you guys feeling?
No, I don't think that the shift that we are sensing, and you're right? There is definitely a shift, but I don't think it's particularly new. I think it possibly is accelerating.
Accelerating is a good point, yeah.
Yeah, we've been building towards this for a decade, I would say. The whole industry has been built on the assumption that centralized control and scale drives value, and the walled gardens won, for a long time.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is that AI is forcing us really to unbind the system. And so we're moving into this agentic era where, autonomous AI systems can create a common language across planning, optimization, and measurement.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of forcing advertisers and publishers to work within the confines of one platform, you're seeing agents negotiate value across multiple independent systems at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you remove that dependency on a single user interface, an entirely new set of possibilities opens up for how advertising actually gets executed and audited.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, agencies and customers are using agentic workflows, or who are using agentic workflows, will be freed from the operational overhead to focus more on strategy and creative work than, and that's where the humans excel.
Amazing. That's why we all got into this industry, right? The creative work.
Yeah. Right. And then everybody who's built margin on manual work is about to have a serious problem, quite frankly. Hence why people need to realize that this revolution is not just about faster workflow.
Yep.
The impact's going to be felt across many areas, and the true leaders that will emerge on the other side will be the ones that can extrapolate real value from this agentic era.
Double clicking on that for a moment. Advertising currently is a little bit channel planning, channel silos. A lot of talk at Cannes was that, consumers don't think in channels. Do you think that that's the great unlock for true omni-channel planning? And are you guys looking at that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think that we're stuck in the middle of this transition right now, we being an industry, not we being Pubmatic necessarily.
Yeah.
And if you listen to earnings calls, people still talk about channel performance, right? They talk about search, they talk about display or CTV, commerce, social, whatever it is. And it's how we've always carved it up. But the smart money doesn't think like that anymore. And what's actually happening is like a horizontal integration. So a brand should be able to describe what they want. Increased consideration in this audience, in this geography. That intent should flow through to a connected system. The system then routes budget to whichever channel, format, context is most likely to work in real time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not humans deciding that on a spreadsheet, right? No quarterly budget allocation meetings. The system is optimizing constantly based on what's actually working.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think commerce media is a really good example of this. It's not actually a channel in the traditional sense. It's the collision of inventory, first-party data, and customer intent, and a brand trying to think of retail media as a separate line item from CTV or a separate line item from social or app or whatever it is, right, is already behind the curve. So the winners in 2 years won't be the companies that think in channels. They'll be thinking in connected systems.
Connected ecosystems. There's a bit of chat about that at Cannes. I mean, that's something we truly believe in at Voodoo, is that whole ecosystem. And like you said, when it comes to retail media, it's the consumer journey that you need to connect, and they're the ones that are going to be thing. Is there anyone doing it well? Are we moving into that space now where we're actually starting to see that eventuate, or are we've just been talking about still on the precipice?
I think we're starting to see that the fruits of that connected commerce idea come to fruition now. Because yes, there are a few companies who are, Emma made a great point around connected systems. For those connected systems to actually work in practice, we need the companies to be connected as well. So what we are starting to see now is these initiatives around companies aggregating their platforms together to give the ecosystem a more unified access to commerce inventory, commerce data, make that idea more seamless and that execution more seamless. And that's only going to be supported by the AI platforms that can then facilitate that trading across those different ecosystems.
From a client's perspective, this is great because navigating the fragmentation of channels, of retail media now, there's heaps of them, as well as all the traditional channels. This is great stuff. This is the promise that they can be truly real time in decision making, right?
No, it is. I mean, that real time element is where you really start to get to the power of what retail media can do for us. Because ultimately, if you can aggregate that efficiently, if you can query that data effectively, then being able to make real-time decisions with the power of AI, with the power of the technology behind you, then we start to see that real shift that the buyers want. Because not only are you proving that the advertising is working, you can take that intelligence and apply it to future activity and continue that virtuous cycle of optimization. We're closer to that point than we've ever been, that sort of magic point of hitting the right consumer with the right message at the right time. But ultimately, yes, we're now at the point where the systems and the technology can facilitate that much more effectively.
Absolutely. And I think when you talk about connected systems, something that's top of mind for me a lot at the moment is a lot of the data and a lot of the interoperability and the connectedness that's happening across CTV. There's a lot happening there. There's a lot of acquisitions happening. There's a lot of dollars moving around, a lot of systems. There's a lot of different products launching and a lot of connecting. And I think there's a promise there for shoppable TV, which is coming to realization in the space. Let's kind of talk about that if we can move into connected TV, because I think it's such a hot topic, and we saw more acquisitions during Cannes, and we saw Roku being acquired. For a long time, it felt digital video was trying to become television, and now it almost feels like television is becoming the central shopping digital spot. And it's been a promise that everyone's trying to crack for a long time, but I feel like we're almost there. Everyone agrees CTV is growing, but it still feels like the industry almost works, still got a bit more working out, and it fits alongside everything else. Where are you guys seeing CTV at the moment? So there's lots of announcements. Has it arrived? Is it fitting into that, advertising landscape now? Is the promises as we hoped, or is it still needs a bit of work? What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting question. And even the framing, has CTV arrived? We pretty much kind of just accept that CTV battle, the attention battle, has been won. My children will never really watch linear TV. The reality is that, the streaming evolution of the way that people interact with that medium is definitely the way forward.
I couldn't agree with you more.
I think we're way past the arrival stage. I think where we are now is really looking at the scale and the efficient scale and true performance, I think would be the clearest way to put it. Because ultimately, we know that CTV has the eyeballs, we know that CTV has the numbers, but now we want to move to a stage where CTV can actually prove true value and prove true value that can actually be trusted. So where historically CTV has always been the sort of big, glossy branding execution for advertisers, now we're starting to get to those more interesting questions where the advertisers want to know, did that ad that the user saw, did that ad actually drive a sale? We know that the answer is more than likely yes, but ultimately it's how, again, we frame that question, because yes, if it's part of an integrated full funnel strategy. So we're seeing the way that retail companies are using CTV as a huge vehicle to shift the way that they trade with their partners and the way that they manage their trade budgets. But ultimately, it is about linking that direct CTV impression to a direct retail transaction. So we're definitely past the experimental phase, and it's now starting to move into a more regular way of managing their CTV activity. But it really comes down to that framing of linking it back to actual transaction and being able to prove that efficiently.
Oh, and that's part of that integrated systems, right?
Indeed, yeah.
That's about, and the strength of those different systems. And that's why you've got, the strength of, Prime they nailed that login with the user quite some time ago. And that obviously then presents challenges for some of the other retailers and the other, CTV operators, because they'd like to get that authentication. So it comes back to integration and systems, right?
Yeah, and I think the other point is, and I think the hook here is commerce.
Great. I'm glad you said that.
You talked about Amazon Prime, but when you actually connect a CTV impression to a retail transaction, right, the measurement then becomes real.
Yeah.
And that's when the budget moves, and that's when the brands take it seriously.
Yeah.
So that's the bit that, you talked about Amazon Prime there, right? But
That sounds eerily very familiar. Has Paul been prepping you?
No, I am just really good at my job.
Yes, you are.
What we're seeing as well is that CTV means, and the ability to use data and the promise that it's already like digital media and performance media. Now you can apply that to the TV screen. Are you seeing more clients be able to use CTV? It's not just the big guys with the big budgets anymore, because you can
Good point.
get quite micro level with the targeting, and because you can now prove ROI, return on ad spend, and all whatever other metric you're measuring?
I think there's a couple of things really that have triggered that. So first of all, it's much easier to buy CTV now than it has been in the past. There's a lot of organizations out there that are making it easier for people to buy CTV. People are starting to see that the scale that you used to only be able to get with linear, you can now get via CTV and streaming. I think Babs talked about that, just earlier on, which was just the scale is there. The measurement is evolving, right? So, and I think that is always going to be the thing that everybody talks about. And it's been the holy grail of digital advertising since I started 20 years ago. But I think it's shifting a little bit. I think what's important is that people are starting to ask, they used to ask, did my ads run? Now what they're asking is, did my ads have a commercial impact? Did it change behavior?
Did they work?
And that's again, right? What does work mean? Because work means different things
correct.
to different people, right? And it means that
True.
what I'm buying is a TV ad for versus, or a CTV ad for versus what Babs is buying a CTV ad for. We could have two completely different objectives. So it isn't just about did it run? It's like, did it have the commercial impact that I was hoping to achieve? And that could be anything from, did it change someone's behavior? Did it signal purchase intent? Did it close a sale? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for a long time, the industry was comfortable with attribution models that were basically an educated guess. Last click, multi-touch, and what we called it solved for. But that only works if your customer journey is linear. And it only works if your customer journey is relatively short. Now, because, and a bit like we were talking about, customers don't consume media in silos, right? Their journeys don't work that way anymore. Someone sees a CTV ad that drives consideration. They search for the product. They see a retail media ad, and then they buy it. If you're only measuring the last touch point, then you're not measuring the campaign. You're measuring the final 10% of the journey and ignoring everything else. And so, we believe that the future is integrated measurement. ROAS, so return on ad spend, is becoming the standard metric that buyers care about. It's not perfect, but it does force an actual conversation about business outcomes rather than about just viewability and reach. And that's healthier for everyone. When retailers evaluate media partners now, they want transparency, they want to see performance, and they want measurement options. And for them, ROAS is the metric that matters. And the thing that's also changing is that as advertisers shift towards performance campaigns instead of just pure brand work, the models powering those campaigns need to be much richer and much more sophisticated. You need more time to execute them properly. And that's actually another reason the sell side is becoming more important. You have the space to run those complex models. You're not constrained by the millisecond handoffs that happen between, multiple people within the chain.
Just one other point to Emma's piece around measurement, because I think one of the key bits around CTV and commerce, or the intersection of CTV and commerce, is that ability to get to that point where we can now start asking the question that sort of causational or the relationship between the ad and the sale. Did this ad actually drive that sale because they saw it as part of the journey, or was it a true point along that journey that contributed to that sale? So causational versus attributional. No, that's not the right term. I think you're getting my point. Actually, being able to prove through the data and the systems that we have, the TV ads are actually delivering the performance that we theoretically have always believed, because you run a big glossy campaign and a month later someone walks into a car showroom to see an ad or to view a car. But ultimately now, if we can link that specific user ID as a connected identity between the retailer or the offline retail environment and the online environment where they saw the ad, that starts to really prove the true value that CTV can add within the commerce context.
Do you know what? We could even flip it on its head, right? So we talk about, what's happened because of my ad and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other question you could ask yourself, and it's probably the question that as an industry we probably don't like to ask ourselves, is what would have happened without the ad?
Did the ad make the impact?
Did the ad actually make any difference at all? And the companies that invest in true incrementality testing, that run proper control groups, that understand causal impact, those are the ones that will actually separate from the pack, right? Everyone else is just optimizing within their own ecosystem and then calling it innovation. And I think the other big differentiator that we haven't touched on yet is context. Retail media growth is really just getting started, but the next wave will come from industries where first-party data, digital touchpoints, and consumer engagement already naturally exist. Retail works, travel is next, finance is emerging, but not every business has the data assets to play in commerce media effectively. So the winner's going to be the company that can architect context-specific solutions instead of trying to sell the same product to everyone. And here's the thing that's interesting. The infrastructure for that is shifting. You're going to see smaller, more specialized buying platforms that are purpose-built for specific use cases.
Do you think some of that's already happening now?
Oh, yeah, I do already think that some of that's happening. I already do think, certainly, like if you go to the US where, political is obviously huge, not so much in Europe because we have slightly different rules around political advertising, but political advertising in the US is huge. And there are very specific specialized buying platforms for politics. If you come over to EMEA, real money gaming or gambling as we call it, right? That's also very specialized. And there are definitely buying solutions that work very well for that. So I think that that's something that we also need to think about as we start to think about, okay, well, who do we actually work with?
Just to bring it back to measurement again, I think it's who do we work with and who do we trust can measure that there was a difference made to the point we'll all be making.
Yeah.
Where do you think, in the next 6 months, measurement is going to be evolving? I mean, you're saying ROAS is now the standard. Where do you think the next sort of wave over the next 6 months is going?
I would pick on 2 points. So one, Paul, you mentioned around a point that I think we've sort of danced around, but really around trust. I think if we use that as the underpinning of how we think about measurement in the future, realistically, there will be lots of different companies who can do a lot of the activity that we're talking about. The ability to connect that.
Trust is the interesting part, isn't it?
Yeah, it starts to really then put an interesting lens on how you look at the insights and the data that you have. You trust the outlet that is providing that information to you. If we use that as our sort of kind of underpinning lens that we think about measurement and how measurement evolves, and then we can start to think about some of the challenges that we will need to overcome to really get to a point where we can really use that trust factor and drive better, or improve our relationships with our brands and our advertisers. Because ultimately, some of the things that will need to be solved for when we think about measurement, and we go back to that point around the connected systems, is some sort of interoperability, so that we don't have advertisers working, or we don't grow into a point where we have advertisers working in specific silos where the information that they see from one particular outlet or one particular streamer, if we think of CTV, differs from another. There's got to be a layer of interoperability or connected measurement where you can see that true view across a full funnel integrated campaign and start to build out real valuable insights of a holistic campaign rather than how you performed in one environment versus another.
I actually think trust goes through the entire ecosystem, not just the measurement piece.
Can we unpack that a bit more?
Yeah, well, okay. So, we are going through, let's call it the third era of the internet, if you want. We're asking our customers to come on a potentially fairly disruptive journey, right? We're asking people to completely change the way that they work, they think, they execute, who they work with, how they buy, et cetera, et cetera. And whenever you go on something like this, where you are fundamentally changing the way that this industry works, it makes sense to work with the partners that you've built a trusted relationship with. And we are almost 20 years, I think we're 20 years old this year. I can't quite remember, but I think that's about right. And so we've invested in our customer relationships for that long. So most of our customers have worked with us, I've been here for 12 years, and most of my customers have worked with us for at least that, if not longer. We've invested in those relationships. We've consistently delivered what they've asked us to deliver, and we've helped bring them along on the journey. And I think that when you're asking somebody to fundamentally change the way that they work, then, it makes sense that they would do that with somebody that they trust.
Yeah, for sure.
Keeping on the trust thing, I think it's also trust in the methodology, trust in the transparency.
The independence.
All those things are probably things that, a business like yours has done over time to earn the trust, et cetera. But
also trust in compliance, right? The whole compliance piece is really important. Yeah. GDPR and the US have got their own compliance state by state. And so, making sure that you're working with a partner who has compliance front and center, who treats data with respect and looks after the privacy of the consumer, that's also really important. And, I think we spent, again, 20 odd years building that and making sure that we do deliver that kind of security to our customers.
One of the things I enjoy about this conversation is that we rarely stay focused on today too long. We start looking at the future and, we want to know where the industry's going next. So if we fast forward 5 years, we'll get into our little time machines and think about where the future's going. There's every chance that today's advertising ecosystem will look a little bit different, no doubt. So if you're mapping that future advertising ecosystem, and AI has really embedded itself. We've got incredible measurement. We're not siloed by channels now. We're running fluidly across everything. What companies and technologies and business models do you think will become more influential than people expect? What do you think there?
Yeah, I mean, you think about the scale of it when we think about the pace of change today. There is 2 years the right way of thinking about it. I mean, it's almost like what's going to be more influential in 6 months. I mean, if we think back 6 months ago, what we were...
6 months to 12 months, right?
Yeah. The scale and the pace of change is just so quick at the moment that, it's trying to keep on top of that and trying to keep abreast of a lot of the initiatives that are happening in the industry are the things that are both terrifying, but also incredibly.
Although I'd challenge you, I might challenge you there and say, yes, there is a rate of change when it comes to, say, having AI across everything. Someone reminded me the other day and said, don't forget, OpenAI that really kicked this off was November 22. Like, it has been 4 solid years of AI changing everything. Does everything change as rapidly as we think it does? Or does it sometimes things are rusted on, it's just and things take longer?
So I think yes and no. So I think 2 ways of looking at it, in that, yes, things do probably change at the pace that we are experiencing or that we feel, but also there are fundamentals that won't change. The requirements that advertisers need, the way that users interact with brands and customers, I think those fundamentals generally stay the same. So when we think about what will be really kind of influential in the future, we're really looking about, how do we take all of these new, exciting, shiny new toys that we have, and how do companies build those together to build solutions that become much more effective for the industry and for our customers? When you're looking at AI, when you're looking at data, when you're looking at the measurement piece that we spend a little bit of time talking about, then starts to come down to I think the real companies that will really stand out or really make the difference in the future are the companies that enable this interoperability, this ability to capture all of the data collaboratively across multiple systems, disparate platforms, make it accessible for buyers and make it actionable. because ultimately we'll move away from the winners being those kind of data hoarders, or the people who kind of, who stockpile the most amount of intelligence, and the only way that you can really use it is if you play in our little playground, to the broader ecosystem where someone who has the ability to tie that together, whether it's through clean rooms or through interoperable APIs, I think that's when we start to get to the real power of how all of these systems and how all of these tools can be brought to bear for the benefit of the wider ecosystem.
With that in mind, what's Pubmatic investing in today for that future? What are the big calls you're making in the next 6 months?
As a company, this is something that Pubmatic has been very, very forward thinking on. We're moving away from sort of the Pubmatic's history as just a traditional programmatic monetization partner for publishers and buyers, to build in this whole agentic layer into our ecosystem. So ultimately moving to a world where how our partners and how our customers interact with us through this agentic layer, through this enablement with AI, through the way that they either access inventory, access data, build campaigns, optimize those campaigns with the power of this agentic layer through natural language, making it as easy, or democratizing that execution layer for all of our partners. Those are the ways that we're really trying to serve the wider industry and build our platforms for the future.
Okay, before we wrap up, we always like to finish with a couple of forward-looking questions. This time I'm going to go with, look, everyone always wonders, you go to market, we're all selling to somebody, we're trying to pitch something, and we always want to hammer home something we know that's being missed. So let's talk about this. Like, what's the biggest opportunity you think the industry is underestimating right now that you want to get across, that when we're all out there, what is that opportunity that you think people are really missing that, really needs to be talked about?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the return on investment of simplification. Every company in our space makes money by adding complexity, right? It's another data layer, another buying interface, another verification partner. The money in the next 5 years goes to whoever can dramatically simplify how advertising actually works. Agentic AI is the vehicle for that, but it only works if we're ruthless about removing things that don't create value. The industry isn't ready for that kind of creative destruction yet, but it is coming. And honestly, describing ourselves as an SSP, that probably doesn't matter anymore. What matters is building an AI native orchestration layer that helps advertisers and publishers achieve better performance. And that is what I think is the future.
Yeah, and you're starting to see some of that. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
you got Meta exposing their buying APIs and tracking to Claude and the AI models so that you can run them yourselves. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Great tip.
Great one. Thank you.
Hey, great to have you both on. We normally finish with most of our guests with just a quick fire, fun round of questions just to ease back out of it and let you go on your days for you and us off to sleep in the time that we're recording this. So I'm going to do a couple of quick fire questions. Emma, I'm going to start with you. What was the last thing that you bought online?
What do I want out there publicly? What's the last thing I bought? Actually, I've done some quite judicious, targeted sale shopping with some clothes from my favorite brand, Me and M. Just get that out there. Maybe they'll eventually hire me as an influencer. Who knows? Nice.
Good.
And Babs, what current podcasts are you listening to?
I do have a range of podcasts I listen to, but I think the ones that I am to my eternal shame, I'm an addict on the US political system. So one of my regular podcasts has to be the PodSave network. So that would be the PodSave the World, PodSave America, PodSave. Yeah,
Yep.
It's a
quick fire, Babs. Quick fire.
Yeah.
You can never do quick fire. PodSave America, I think. Those are the series that I've missed for.
Okay, well, we'll finish on this one. Emma, no pressure. Everyone has that one great creative ad campaign when it was all about big creative campaigns. What's the most memorable ad campaign for you?
Oh my God, it's the Guinness horses.
I was thinking that.
Every time. I mean, we did start the conversation with Guinness, but it's just like the whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole, like the music, just like the oh my God, it's just incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. I don't even drink Guinness.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But yeah, it's incredible,
perfect.
actually.
Brilliant.
Guys, awesome session.
Emma, Babs, great to have you both back.
Well, it's lovely to be back, and the sun is shining still.
Definitely. Great to be back with you guys. Yes.
Thank you for listening to the Commerce Media Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe. We're always on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of commerce media, ready to share the newest trends, insightful perspectives, and expert opinions with you. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep making media that matters. This podcast is executively produced and edited by Priya Tahazadeh, with co-producers Sandy Ho and me, Rachel Fang. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Bidjigal, Gadigal, and Wurundjeri people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land.